This morning I was watching the Jensen Huang keynote address at the GTS March 2025 conference. And as I was listening to it, my thoughts went back to 1980 in Bill Gates and his comment that someday in the future there would, well, let me show you.
Well, Paul Allen, my co-founder, and I wrote down that we'd see a computer on every desk and in every home. We saw the microprocessor, the chip that drives it, improving so rapidly that any access to information or processing of information would move into the PC, and it would be the tool of the information age. And so that general belief is what we've been moving towards these 15 years.
Then as Jensen went on to explain the evolution of the GPUs to the advancement in the GPUs and how that would advance into AI and then that would advance into robotics, I thought back to an interview that I saw with Steve Jobs in 1985. That's 5 years later than the Bill Gates interview, in which Steve Jobs suggested that he might someday be able to have a conversation with someone who has been dead hundreds of years. Watch this.
My hope is that in our lifetimes, we can make a tool of a new kind, of an interactive kind. And when I look at the personal computer, we're, as you know, living in the wake of the last revolution, which was a new source of free energy. And that was the free energy of petrochemicals, right? And it completely transformed society, and we're products of this petrochemical revolution, which is we're still living in the wake of today. We are now entering another revolution of free energy. A Macintosh, as you know, uses less power than a few of those light bulbs, and yet can save us a few hours a day or give us a whole new experience. And it's free intellectual energy. It's crude, very crude, but it's getting more refined year after year after year. And in our lifetimes, it should get very refined. And so my hope is someday, when the next Aristotle is alive, we can capture the underlying worldview of that Aristotle in a computer. And someday, some student will be able to not only read the words Aristotle wrote, but ask Aristotle a question and get an answer. And that's what I hope that we can do.
That was 40 years ago. And here we are today, and we are experiencing that. Jensen is describing to us how we will go through the paths of AI and then generative AI. And then that will take us to robots. And then that will take us to the next step. And we as investors are deniers. We don't believe that this can happen. We don't recognize the change that is about to take place in the companies that are going to grow out of this. The massive amount of compute that is going to be needed and is going to be housed in data centers. So recognizing that those people who are building data centers are building the massive computers that we're going to need to foresee Steve Jobs' vision, to foresee or to make possible Bill Gates' vision, and then Jensen Huang. These three people put together have mapped out the path of the future. And it's those who recognize and understand what they're talking about and how it's going to work who are going to make the right investment decisions. I've been talking lately about growth companies or companies that generate revenues, continuing quarter after quarter, year after year, growth of revenues in excess of 20%. And what all you have to do is have access to the data that will identify who are those companies. Who are the companies for the last 3 years have been on this path that Steve Jobs and Bill Gates told you about 40 and 45 years ago? Who are they that are are going to grow this machine that is going to give me the ability to ask Aristotle a question. Who are they? Well, we know Jensen is one of them. We know that Amazon, Google, Meta are spending trillions of dollars collectively to buy Jensen's GPUs, to put them into data centers so that we can create this compute that gives us the ability to ask any question of anyone, whether they're alive, dead, or they're in the future. And when I say in the future, I'm able today to go into ChatGPT Pro and say, here is the income statement, the balance sheet, the cash flow statement. Here is the 10K that any company I want has filed. Here is 15 analysts' interpretation of their work. And here is the last earnings statement transcript. Now tell me, what's the future of this company? What's the physical or the financial health of the company? And based on their current spendings and their increase in their workforce, what are they a part of the growth element? And in fact, what is the price of their stock going to be at the end of December of 25, 26, 27, and 28? And it'll give me an answer. Now, in the past, I could have gotten a similar answer from a Wall Street firm if I was willing to pay an analyst $50,000. He could give me that information. But now, I'm Kerry Grinkmarman, an 80-year-old retired financial advisor living in Birmingham, Alabama, in my basement, and I have access to the same information. Bill told me this was coming. Steve told me 5 years later it was coming. Why didn't I pay attention? Why aren't we paying attention today? Jensen mapped it out. He even put a line on the screen behind him that showed you what is going to happen. Now, so does that mean I invest everything in Amazon, Google, Apple, Microsoft, Meta, and NVIDIA, and 7 companies and let it go? No. I mean, yeah, with those 7 companies, I can probably average a return over the next 20 years of 30%. I'm confident. Well, don't make it 30 years, make it 10 years, because we don't know what's going to happen in 2035. But the other thing is, in order to make those companies grow at 30%, somebody's going to have to grow at 300%. Because they're going to have to build the data center. They're going to have to cool the data center. They're going to have to make it possible. And then there's somewhere in somebody's garage right now a company that's going to come up with something totally new and different. I mean, when Steve was making this announcement 40 years ago, there was no such thing as Amazon. There was no such thing as Netflix. There was no such thing as the last. There was no NVIDIA. So as an investor, I need to invest in that core portfolio, but I need to identify who is the company for the last 3 years has been growing their revenue in excess of 20% per year and then is projecting like or greater growth in revenue, which will lead to profits, which will lead to stock prices. Who are they? Well, Steve said, ask Aristotle, and he'll give you the answer. We're not going to ask Aristotle, though. We're going to ask ChatGPT. We're going to ask Bard. We're going to ask AI, and they're going to tell us. That's what I'm now doing on a daily basis. I ask questions. Aristotle gives me the answer. Are you making the connection? Aristotle, I mean AI. And it's only getting better. And it's getting better at doing more things. I mean, beyond asking Aristotle, I can ask Michelangelo to paint me a painting. I can ask Picasso to paint me a painting like I've got right here. But I painted that. But I don't need to paint it anymore. AI can do it for me. And do it with a paintbrush and acrylics or oils, whichever I choose. That's the future. That's where you and I need to be investing. It's going to cost some money. I'm willing to spend the money. I'm going to ask you to share in the cost. Right now it's $19.95 a month. But I'm not going to ask you for that. I'm going to give you a free trial. Come to my website, bestofusinvestors.com, and join Bill and Steve and Jensen and Aristotle and I on the venture of a lifetime. I hope you're 20 years old and you're listening to this and you're understanding it and saying, that old man can make a difference in my life. He can show me the path to my future. God, I wish I was 20 years old.